Hola community, welcome to another episode 160. Nice. Welcome to this weekly meeting of what is new in Blender, in the community, in development. Today is going to be mainly about development. There is so much. I didn't know what to choose for the name of this episode. I went with geometry modes, which some people guessed in the chat that it was a pun. Yes, it's a really bad pun, but it is because there is geometry nodes news, but also a new mode of geometry nodes for instancing and also for curves. Spoiler alert. Should I give a spoiler alert? No, let's start immediately with what's new in Blender today. Okay, speaking of Blender today though, if you want to ask questions, just make sure you drop by Blender.community. On the website, there's this thread by Sansuls. Thank you for making the thread. Leave your questions here. I'm gonna try to answer them towards the end of the show, whatever time I have left from the end of the live stream. And no, I am not at the studio. This is my house. I'm still here. It took me a bit longer to set up the live stream because I did go to the studio to set it up, but it's just not perfect yet. It's actually far from perfect. There were some issues with audio, but I'll try to solve them during the week. Now, time to see what is new in Blender as of today. So let's kickstart with geometry nodes. Why even delaying the news? Blender instancing now supports geometry. So now you can instance geometry. You can do you don't need an object info node. So let's see how it works. In the geometry nodes, you can now for the instancing node. So if we search for instance, point instance, the same. This is a request by the community for a while, and so far you could only use object or collection. So an entire collection with all the objects inside. You could even choose the entire collection or set a seed or a specific object. So you had to bring the object from outside, from the outliner, drag and drop. I love this feature. But no, not anymore. Now you can use geometry. So anywhere in the, you can just hook in some geometry, like, for example, why not some primitives? So if I want to have instance an icosphere, I can use a primitive. I don't need to have the object in the scene. This is super nice. Super nice. Oh, because also you can just deform it. You can do anything here and it all stays within this. So there are some nodes, quite some nodes, because this is not work in the park to implement. Turns out, well, here you can see the commit log by Shaq. You can read about this on all the links that I'm seeing are in the description below. Next to that like button, like MKVHD, below that like button. Yeah, it turns out that, yeah, it's not so simple. You know, you have to let the render engines know about this, for example. So the change was done for Cycles EV and the viewport engines like the Workbench. But if you have a render engine, if you are working on one or have an add-on that depends on that kind of instance geometry, then you have to do some changes. So make sure you check here the technical data to update all your stuff. You know what else? Let's switch topics immediately because, well, not so much, because in curves, the curve object now supports geometry nodes. So geometry nodes is no longer limited to or exclusive to the mesh objects anymore. So now if I flip to the other side, flip. I should have had a sound when I flip, like the pipe sound. Geometry nodes, now you can add them directly to the geometry objects. There is also some notes around about this here in the commit. Let's see the commit log by, if I'm not wrong, Hans. Yeah. So also, it wasn't a walk in the park. There are some changes in the, there is functionality wise, it's pretty close to what you were already used to. There is a change that the use field deform option is removed. It wasn't working properly since 2.62, so that's been a while. But overall, make sure you read this if you want to know a little bit more. But overall, it should be pretty straightforward, and this opens the doors. Now that we have other object types to support geometry nodes, this opens the door for any other objects. Can we have, well, text is a kind of a curve. Does it have, oh, does it? It has, but does it work as, I don't want to play with it too much. I don't want to break it in the middle of the live stream. So you know what else is exciting? That it's experimental. I said I don't share too many experimental features unless they are inside of Blender, like in Master, the one that you can download from builder.blender.org. Well, fields. Fields, it's experimental, it's a flag, it's hidden, but once you have that enabled, you're gonna find you can play with the new system that is going to replace how geometry nodes work currently. So in the preferences, I assume in experimental, you can turn on geometry nodes fields directly here without having to download a new build. And there are the whole way of geometry nodes, how they work, is going to change. So make sure you know what you're doing. You don't do it in production for sure. If the feature is under experimental, it's for a reason. Also, you shouldn't be using 3.0 alpha software during production, unless you're super brave. So there are a few nodes that are going to show up with geometry nodes fields enabled: position, index, normal, set position, and attribute capture. So this is still not, this is still experimental, so I'm not gonna go deep into this. Hopefully I can, once this becomes official and leaves the experimental stage, I can maybe have some people at the studio helping out to talk about it. It's such a big milestone. I'll try to get Dalai, convince him to come to the live stream once I'm in the office. Okay, changing into more geometry nodes, but this is the color sockets now are exposed to the modifier. They're allowed to be exposed to the modifier. And also, speaking of support, adding support, the resample curve node now supports evaluated. So what you see on the viewport, basically the end result. So yeah, it's expected to be faster. So it doesn't have to sample equal positions on the result. And it's also consistent with the existing choices in the curve 2 points node. So that is for this Saturday. Where are you? Ah, no, okay. It was very early. So it was Friday night. Hans, go to bed. Don't stay up too late. We need, well, it's tough times for development. We are, what, 13 today? So we are like less than 10 days away from the Beacon 2 section stage of Blender releases. So that means that no new features, only, well, once we enter this stage in 9 days from now, it's gonna close the big features. The smaller ones that are related to the existing projects can make it in, but yeah, that's why developers are working on a Friday night, Saturday morning, just to get as much as possible in for 3.0. Such a big release. Although I think it's time to maybe not hype 3.0 as much as 3.x. Not because of Cycles X, but the entire 3.0 series, I think, is going to be much more exciting than the 3.0 itself. Even though, okay, it is going to be, it's going to break the internet. Maybe, at least in the B3D bubble that we live in. Okay, speaking of B3D, the release dates for 3.0 has been announced, and it's going to be at the beginning of December. So it might be around the 3rd of December. Whatever the date. B3D, B3 December. Wouldn't that be great if we can make it around that time? So yeah. Continuing. Cycles X in 3.0. Yep, that is the plan, to have Blender, well, the new Cycles in 3.0. Okay, time to switch. Let's go into something a bit more light. The user interface changes of this week. There is tiny little tricks here and there that are gonna make things so much nicer. Like this little change by Hartley. It basically shows it's a small thing, but it helps readability when you're trying to merge windows, for example, or split in different directions. Not windows, editors. The cursor now is gonna tell you if it's forbidden or not to move in that direction. So yay for making things more clear. And speaking of icons, the icons for line art, length, and the dot dash, the modifier that's not there yet, they are now in master. So you will see in the geometry, in the grease pencil modifiers, you're gonna find new icons for length and for line art. There's it's like a cube with a pen, kind of descriptive, right? And the length is like 2 lines going around. So yay, new icons. If you make add-ons, I think add-on people like to use as any icon that they can, or that it kind of fits their tools. So check this one out. Maybe you can use them. Okay. Next change, it's this is an implementation of a widget that is already present in other places. This is for animation. So in the graph editor, you're now gonna find the slider that is used, that was added recently for changing the pose values. So now this is available in the in a more generic way, so it can be added to other places. For the time being, it's added to the decimate operator in the graph editor. So you can choose the ratio, basically, by moving to the left or to the right. This has been, it was added before for more specific use in the draw code, but now it's more generic. So I wonder if even add-ons can use this. That would be cool. The colors, though, they're not great yet. There is a thread that is going to make them change. So yeah, that I think it's actually I am tagged here. I have to check this one. Okay, I have work to do. Let's move fast then. The community is helping out by making things more clear. Look at this work by Nick Hill. The options for the quad view were a bit confusing. It wasn't very descriptive. Like the quad view settings in the viewport, there were 3 boxes, like lock, box, and clip. Lock what? What is it locking? Rotation? What? Okay, lock rotation. That is because you can zoom in and out, but you can't rotate. So now it's more descriptive. Lock rotation. The same for the zoom and the panning. Now you can, there's an option that says sync and zoom pan. Box. Such a weird name to choose, box. And then clipping objects as well. It's a bit more descriptive. So thank you, Nikhil, for, I don't know if you're watching this, but super nice to have the community helping out to make things more readable. Sometimes these kind of changes, I think the quad view was added by Ton, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, really long time ago. So it's good to have these things revised. And also, if you as a user find some weird label and you see that doesn't make any sense, please do mention it somewhere. Go and right click select, make a thread, or on Blender chat, or just tell the world. Maybe right click select is the best, it's the best place. Yeah, things like that, you know, sometimes they were coded many years ago and just go unnoticed. So the next improvement is not really user interface, but it's more like a potpourri change. I have the potpourri section a bit later, but this one is user experience. So it's the asset in the asset browser, you know, you can drag and drop materials from the asset browser into the viewport. Well, now you can drag them from the material slots. So this patch allows dropping material assets from material slot under the mouse cursor. Before this change, the material slot had to be handpicked from the properties panel. Not anymore. So yay for that. Thanks, Jeroen. Is there a video of it? Oh, there is a video. Let's look at videos. I've been talking too much. Glonk. Ew, creepy. Drop metal on slot 2, replacing, and it tells you which slot is replacing, which material is replacing. Like, let's see. Oh, I have a patch for this change, for this color that it's unreadable. It's like, I look at the code, it's like 0.2 alpha, the background, and it should use, I need to share this patch on my branch. It's hard-coded to be very, very not readable, but it tells you the slot and it tells you which material is replacing. So it's super, super handy. That's it with the user interface, user experience changes of this week. We have a Pablo reacts to Blender feature. By the way, I'm checking. I have the chat here next to the window, so it's funny. I see you're discussing about CPU, GPU, and then Pablo reacts to Blender features. Maybe that's one way of getting getting more views in these videos. Although I noticed that the view count is still the same. It's just the people watching it live is not the same. It used to be like 600-700 people. Now it's 300-400 usually, but the amount of views in each video, it's usually the same. That's interesting. Sorry, I'm having a drink while I prepare for the next section. Performance, the favorite of many. Let's continue. Okay, performance. Who wants a faster texture editing workflow? Me, please. Let's see how much faster it is. So, okay, Jeroen Bakker, which he worked on the feature that we just mentioned on the and also on many others regarding performance lately. And he has another one about performance, but this one is my favorite performance change of the week. So I don't think I even need to explain it to you. It's just a matter of watching the video because it's just brilliant. So load it, please. Press play. There. So now you see how slow it is. Well, that is master. So that is the current version, or like until last week, of Blender. You see that it's a bit choppy. There's not even that many, but the picture is very large. The thing is, the texture was drawn twice, full size, and then it was rescaled every time you move it here in the viewport. So now, if you wait a little bit, it's gonna show up. Bam! This is new. Full. I am speed. That's awesome. Responsiveness. On something so simple as moving a texture around. So yay for performance. I wonder how many of these are left around. This little thing's awesome. The developers are looking into this. It's better than any other feature ever. It flies. Blender 3.0 is going to be a beast of performance compared to, before people quote me, and it's like, no, because this other software is faster, compared to 2.7 or 8 or 9. The other improvement, also by the man himself, Jeroen, look at this. The drawing of the keyframes is now much faster, so much faster that it basically is reducing it's adding more frames per second. So how much faster? Well, on a test that was giving 0.20 seconds, for example, per frame, now it's 0.08. So much faster. Let's see there's a video also that shows it again in Very nice detail. Thank you, Jeroen, if you're watching this and you're making these videos. Know that this is awesome. Look how choppy the animation is. Just seeking through it. So when you see this as a user, you think maybe it's the too much geometry, maybe it's too many. You never think that it's too many keyframes in the viewport or the motion pads. Look at now. Boom. Yay. Fast. Isn't that great? Again. Tuck, 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 tuck. Slow, 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 slow. And then so fast. So furious. Nice. Thank you. Once again. It is amazing. And also, this is one improvement. But on top of that, this is what I think this is before adding multi-threading, because then after that there was another commit that enables threaded drawing, so multi-threaded. So the more cores you have, the better, the faster it goes. How much faster? Well, on this test, it was done on an AMD Ryzen 3 3800 with a motion capture data test file. It went from 2 frames per second to 8 frames per second. So that's 4 times faster. So just awesome. Just amazing. It's yeah, I'm speechless. Everything is faster in 2.8, in 2.9, in 3.0, sorry. In Blender 3.0. Ryzen 3, yeah, it's a Ryzen 3. It's not even a 5950 or expensive. No, and a Ryzen 3800, which is very high. It's high end, but it's not the highest end. So, something else that is faster now. You know what? Mantaflow. So there is a patch that makes Mantaflow much faster by Eric, a patch by Eric Abrahamson that makes Mantaflow super fast, so much faster. It's like 1.54x speed up. However, this patch is not in yet entirely. It's being worked on, but there is already a part of it that was committed by Sebastian Vazquez, and this adds here, it's parallelization for Mantaflow function. So it's part of the performance boosts from that patch, and it got around 16% increase, which is still a lot, right? It went for, in this simulation test, it went from 26.5 frames per, seconds to bake to 22. So, yay. So looking forward to that being GPU one day. But hey, CPU also, performance boosts are also important. Even before GPU, I would say. So, okay, I have a UI change between all of this that it was left from the previous section. So quickly going back in time to show this nice change by Harley again. I should have grouped it with his other change this week. It's making the user interface for the user preferences nicer and easier to read. More like, how much nicer? Well, it was a bit confusing. Not only it was bad, it was confusing. Like the file browser settings in the user preferences. So here, user preferences. The file browser settings had an option called filter file extensions without any headings, and it wasn't very clear that these are the defaults. So when you save these settings, the next time you open the file browser, you have some filters pre-filtered. The other settings was also very confusing. This is mainly if you do UI or UX. This up here is really bad. So having options to hide it's better to have an option to show and that it's on, instead of having flip your face, please. Oh, thank you. But this is how I'm actually, this is, but yeah, okay, sorry. I was blocking the side of the screen, but there's not much to see. There you go. Thank you, While, in the chat for letting me know. Yes, so keep in mind that if you're doing UI stuff, it's better to have a positive setting like show than hide. So, yep. The change. Now let's go into the potpourri section. The potpourri section, which is a mix of everything. A mix of settings, changes that don't fit in other sections, but are also super exciting to have. This one is very, 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 very exciting for people working in a studio or in or like interoperability with other software via USD or Alembic or even just Blender stuff. So you know that in physics, when you save or export physics, you had a velocity attribute. Well, now that attribute is it comes from the modifier. So any modifier can export these attributes. It means that if you're using, for example, you're exporting Blender stuff in Alembic or USD, you're gonna have this velocity attribute that also you can use in also other attributes that come, or even geometry nodes can use this because it's in the modifier. Look at this. It's a change by Brecht. Previously, fluid simulation and Alembic modifiers had a dedicated function to query the velocity for motion blur. Now it uses a more generic system where those modifiers output a velocity attribute. The advantages are geometry and particle nodes and particle. I like how the spoiler alert of what is to come, you know, is like particle nodes, just dropping in there. FYI, particles are not there yet, but it's nice that it's being mentioned. Can output velocity through the same mechanism or read the attribute coming from earlier modifiers in the stack. So you can actually read these values, the velocity attributes, in geometry and in the future in particle nodes. That is amazing. The velocity can also be preserved through modifiers like subdivision, surface, or autosmooth. Another extra point. Universal scene description and Alembic previously only output velocity from the fluid simulation. Now they work with velocity from other sources too. So not only fluid simulations, but anywhere. And it also simplifies the code for renderers like Cycles and exporters like Alembic and USD, because they had to basically implement their own way of exporting velocity. Not anymore. Now it's all unified. The downsides, there are downsides, yes, that external renderers and exporters have to be updated if they are using any kind of Python API to access the velocity, for example. They need to update it, but we are in Beacon 1 still, so that gives them, yeah, from now until September to be updated. So it's fair enough. There is what, 3 months, 9, yeah, to bit less. You can change the API on a few days before, but yes, plenty of time. The existing modifier node setups can create an attribute named velocity will render differently with motion blur. Yep, that is another thing. If you have, if in your geometry node setups you are using the name velocity for some attributes, that is gonna look a bit different. So keep that in mind when you need to update your files. But hey, super worth it. You know what else is fun, since we're talking about modifiers? This one, again, super handy if you are in a studio environment or you are your own studio at home and you take advantage of the mesh sequence cache modifier, because now the mesh cache modifier supports vertex groups. That we need clapping. This is awesome. This is just amazing because, for example, you have a cloud simulation that you made in another software and you want to bring it into Blender, but you don't want to replace the entire part of your mesh. You just want a little bit, just a vertex group. Now you can. So thanks to Maxime Casas here in this commit that reads, Mesh Cache Modifier adds support for vertex groups. Allow blending the import cache with the modifier stack above the mesh cache modifier. This particular, well, this is the example that I just gave. So this is particularly useful, for instance, when dealing with cloud simulations performance in another software, where some parts of the cloud are completely pinned or not simulated. This will allow modifying the animation in some areas without having to rebake the other parts of the mesh, resulting in a much more flexible workflow. And indeed it is. Actually, there is a video. Thank you, Maxime, for making the videos. So here you're gonna see the, so the sequence is a cache that is coming from the modifier. And as you can see, the section that is painted is not being affected. So yay for flexibility. Even if you're not in a studio, using mesh cache modifiers, super recommended, I would say. 10/10. We'll cache again. Okay, next. Ooh, super nice. Look, this is actually related to cycles. So cycles, well, cycles and the rest of Blender. So the Berlin noise now, it's the texture is now compatible, or the functions are compatible with cycles. So they should look the same across all the engines, including if you're using them in geometry nodes, for example. So if you look at the patch, there is a video going around, I believe here. There you go, by Jack even. So comparing the different noises and how they look in geometry nodes, and also how they look in the shader. So I think now it changes to to the viewport, and this is how it looks. So it matches. Okay, last but not least, AMD GPU users, rejoice, because now you can enable Steam VR OpenGL backend again. It was disabled for a while due to some crashes with other graphics cards, but now it's enabled again. So it seems to be tested even with older graphics cards, and it should work. Yeah, that's cool. So you can use VR even if you're using an AMD graphics card. Okay, that is I think that is all for the news, unless, well, there is some changes that I wanted to mention about Cycles X. There's a lot of work going on, mainly fixes and under the hood changes. Just good to mention that tile support is back in the shape of it's more for memory saving than performance. In the past, the tile size was directly related to performance. If you had a wrong size of the tiles, it could really mess up your render times completely. So now, because Blender automatically chooses that size, you have a bit more control for the performance that is going to be saved, that is going to be used. Sorry, performance memory that is going to be used, because it can render and then keep that, or like save that to disk, so it doesn't have to do it, doesn't have to use it again, or uses a lot of memory. And that is all. Actually, there is another change for non-interactive rendering, but this is this is more under the hood. Although there is a few changes that are benefiting from this change, like you can it allows you to see any pass during the rendering. So as you're rendering, you can see the passes That is super cool. And performance, because it solves the bottleneck of data transfer and color management by using GPU displays for not interactive render. So the F12 is should be faster, as fast as having it in the viewport. So yay for that. Okay, that is all for this week sections of news. And what time is it? Okay, I have 8 minutes. Isn't that great? No, I started late, so I'm gonna give it a bit more time for the questions. But you see how the news are speeding up, how we are getting closer to Beacon 2 and things are happening. All right, let's see what's new in Blender today. Geometry modes. Okay, I'm gonna click on it again. 23 comments. No likes. Come on, people, like, give the thanks to Sansuls for working on it. Let's see. Okay, so for the first question, something is happening. Something is gonna cause. Okay, I'm gonna sit. No, I'm standing actually. Something is happening. Something is gonna cause many industry standard software users to switch to Blender, and the numbers of those people will only go up with time. Yes. If Blender was a stock, I would buy it so much. I would invest everything. But there are very small, minor little things that are sort of missing in Blender. I would argue not everything that we think is small is actually that small. But let's see. Story time, exactly, Kayvandan. Sort of because there are workarounds, but it could get tedious in the long run. And probably the biggest one, which is actually pretty small compared to super advanced stuff like geometry nodes or Eevee or sculpting. It's grouping, and Blender Bob made a completely detailed video explaining and comparing groups with industry standard software, and also show some workarounds. Yeah. Grouping, like a whole new group system in Blender, is by no means small. There are so many things that depend on it, and we already have the collection system that Blender relies on it a lot for instancing, for all kinds of stuff. So either grouping has to be a new kind of thing, but then people will start asking for groups to be supported in areas where collections are used for that. So the team is aware of this, and it's something to discuss. But I would agree that this should be in the 3.x series. So for the 3.x release, either by adding transforms to the groups, to the collections, having some kind of a special collection group flag for collections. But yeah. Too long, didn't read, didn't watch. Groups and collections are not the same thing, and please don't turn collections into groups. What I just said. Groups are more or less basically parenting objects to an empty. But then why don't you parent things to an empty? But it has less steps, and parenting doesn't do everything in Blender that grouping does. Like being able to see all the objects in a group when you just select the group empty. And then being able to copy them in the viewport without selecting the whole hierarchy from the outliner, etc. Everything that have been explained side by side comparison. And you can do most of them already, but there are often 2-3 extra steps required, and some stuffs are missing, and that's literally it. So that okay, Slow Kids answers. So yeah, this has to, okay, this discussion went a little bit. But yeah, this is definitely under the radar for the team. But yeah, it's not a small thing to add a whole new collection thing, like not collection or grouping kind of, or like container type of dilemma inside of Blender. It has to be really thought through. Add-ons should be able to use it. I don't know, render engines maybe, or I don't know. It has a lot of implications. Visibility, people will like to color the groups and see them in the viewport with different colors, but you have collections already. There is so much overlap than maybe just adding yeah, like a transform or from a collection, making it into a group that you can select and click. Maybe that's it. Hola Pablo, can we get a search in the add modifiers list? There was a patch for that actually. And Hans, were you in the chat recently? Where is this? I am so happy I even accepted it time ago. But what was it? Has an approved status, however, it was not committed. So I'm assuming the other reviewers are blocking, updating the reviewer list to reflect this. That was in March. So can we have this again? I remember we talked about it. But yeah, this is one way of adding it too. But also another way would be to just maybe, well, just, it's not easy, but implementing some kind of search inside of every menu. So not only for the add modifier, but also editors or yeah, anything here. You could have a menu here, right? That you can search inside. That would be cool. But yeah, this workaround of right-clicking in the area and just adding it, that would be awesome. It's a bit weird because we don't have that in anywhere else in Blender, but I would argue that it helps more than it harms until we have real search in menus. Yeah, I would like to make that change considering node groups with the asset browser, etc. Okay, Hans is in the chat. Hi, Hans. he made this patch and he's in the UI team and geometry nodes team. The design isn't really obvious anymore. Yeah. We have to think about it. But even in that stage, it's already... The asset browser can display any custom modifier made with geometry nodes with thumbnails. Yes, but the asset browser... But what if you just want to add a modifier that is not part of the asset? Like, these are not assets, right? Yet. Eventually, they could be. But for these modifiers or this even list of modifiers, not all of these are going to become a geometry node in the future, like oceans. That's not going to become a geometry node or an asset. I'm sure that hello Pablo, I'm sure that such a weekly show is a lot of work, so thank you for putting all the time into it. Thank you. It is quite some work, but the most work is actually to keep doing it like the consistency, like every week having to do it and canceling plans because of this. But it's so worth it. People are finding out the speed of development, and I think it really shows in the support we get on the Blender Development Fund, which I actually never plug, but I think people know already. The Development Fund is what keeps this show and Blender alive, mostly. So thank you to everybody supporting it, like you supported the Code Quest 2.8. Okay, next. My question is about random crashes on Blender. Is there any crash log that is auto-created on crash? Yes, there is in the temp, whatever that temp is in. Well, on Linux is /tmp. On Windows, I'm not sure. Where is it in Windows temp? Do they still put it there? You don't have permissions. I have, and then you click and you have permission. Yeah, very secure. I think it was somewhere there that it saves the crashes. Correct me if I'm wrong. Will there even be a use in sharing such crash logs, since I will not be able to describe the bug very well if I could describe it at all? That's the problem, that they're not always super descriptive unless you're using a debug build. Those are the best ones. But yeah, no one uses a debug build if you're not really like into reporting issues. Should such random crashes even be reported if it cannot be reproduced? I would say no here, but on the other hand, every crash is bad and it can ruin a lot of work. Well, that's the problem. If you can reproduce, is of course 1,000 times better. If you can't, but it's kind of consistent, like if you follow a bunch of steps and repeat it often, that can help. But yes, random crashes, the yeah, they're really hard to nail down. Sometimes the best is to just try and use a newer version of Blender under development, or yeah, hope for the best. If you can nail down the issue with a simpler file, that's the best. Next question. Defaults. No high. Pop freshener Mayer. Are the restriction toggles in the outliner still deactivated by default? If so, switch this to on. For instance, they are key when opening pre-2.8 files as object layer. Well, you have these two settings on. These two are on, and then the other ones are not on because they just take too much space. And also we have to fix, well, this has to be fixed, like the clipping of the column. It's clipping way too much, and you can't see, like it cuts the text too close to, and doesn't even add dots to the strings. If anybody is looking at this, oh wow, it even pushes the icons a bit. Anyway, yeah, no, they're not all of them on by default because you don't need all of them all the time. Like the selection, well, this one I would argue, this one I would like to have it as on. But yeah. Next. When opening 2.8 pre-2.8 files as object layer, status will influence the outliner settings in 2.8 and up. Anyway, these are very important toggles and should be visible by default. Which ones? Object layer status. Next question, Scopelma. Hey Pablo, first of all, thank you for your work. Has become a thing I look forward every Monday afternoon. Thank you. I have a question about parallax occlusion mapping support in Blender, and more specifically Eevee. Some months ago, there was some discussions and even a build for it. By any chance, have you heard anything about it recently? No, I haven't. There was a build even. It has been interested in supporting parallax. So for example, here. Now, usually you have to look at the patch, which is, this is not a patch, but there is some development apparently. I didn't know there was development. No, usually the best is just to ask and poke. Sometimes people either forget or there is something else in the, like right now there is an Eevee refactor going on. So it gets in the way, but there is this patch from December, parallax occlusion mapping for displacement output. Look at the support it has. I wonder if this is waiting for, well, there is plenty of support. I wonder if this is waiting for Eevee refactor or what exactly. Well, the first thing it would need right now, it would be for the developer, for Michael Muller, to update this to master. You can see that you see here since March it's unable to apply. James is unable to apply. But yeah, the first thing is to poke the developer if they can update the patch to master. Let's see. It's a fantastic trick, allows a very useful quasi-display. Yeah, I've seen this and really looking forward to have it on. But and I know a lot of people too, especially in the game development, or also just Eevee rendering. There is a vertex group and face map, but why not? Hi, Mahendra. There is a vertex group and face map, but why not edge groups, which are very used? That's also another question that we get often, and because of the flip cam again. There, sorry. This is a question we get often. The vertex groups is basically gonna become a more generic attribute. Face map should never exist because they are not, they were implemented but never really implemented, if you understand. It's there on the UI, but it's not used for by anything or for anything other than add-ons. So they should be refactored too and just become more generic attributes. And the same for edge groups. Hi Pablo, I use a Windows. Okay, how about let's do 5 more questions. I'm already a bit running out of time. So Dogbad Wrench says, hi Pablo, I use a Windows File Explorer replacement that allows me to navigate my folders with great speed. One of the keys is that it communicates with any open and file save dialog and pre-navigates to any file location that is copied to the clipboard. That's nice. This works with virtually all my software. Is it open source? Except for Blender. Blender files window behaves more like a standard window and never inherits any of this information. Is this something that could be improved in the future without affecting Blender's excellent ability to have multiple windows open? I'm not sure I understand. So Blender's file open window behaves more like a standard window. Yeah, the file open in Blender it's very, very unique, I would say. It's its own. So if it has to communicate with anything from the outside, that has to be coded, I think. More like a standard window and never inherits any of this information. Yeah, it's very specific. I wonder if the developers of this other software have, like, if it's an open source software and they have some kind of API exposed that they use, could be done. There's many things in Blender that are only for Windows, only for Mac, or only for Linux. So I wonder if this is public, like the API that has to be used for this. Another question by Mahendra without a hello. Add a single vertices inside mesh menu so it can be starting of any geometry node creation start point. You can enable the add-on that is called add mesh extra objects. Yep, there you go. If you enable that, you have Shift A mesh single vert, and you can add that to anything. So I think you can add it to the quick favorites or to a shortcut. So you can add lots of single verts. Next question. Hello Pablo, today I want to do a shout out to a small feature usability request regarding Keymap search, which I think could save a lot of time. Let's see. Key binding an option in Keymap search should type the key automatically. What do you mean? In the Keymap preferences, when using the key binding option for the search menu, so this, you have to literally type letter by letter buttons like Control, Alt, etc. Slowing down a lot of the process of searching. Oh, okay, so the detect should be here. Yeah, that would definitely help. I wonder if having it in string kind of helps you hack it in a way, and if your keyboard is not detected right by this key, maybe typing it allows you to hack it in a way, like, you know, the tilde. Sometimes it's called tilde, sometimes it's called something else. I wonder. But other than that, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if you can't detect the key here, then you're not gonna have a good luck here. Although when you switch between name and key binding, this should update. This should be replaced. But yeah, I see what you mean. Maybe that's an easy one for a new developer. It's very isolated, so yeah. So 2 more questions. Hola Pablo. Gilberto says, it would be nice to see some updates to opendata.blender.org. For example, some NVIDIA GPUs are mentioned twice in the fastest GPU list. And for some reason, some CPUs don't show up on the fast CPUs, like Epic which are a lot faster for rendering than some of the list, and they've been used in benchmarks. This, yeah, makes sense actually. Fastest CPU. Yeah, this website needs some love. This project, by the way, every project like such as Open Data or pretty much any project in Blender, it's open for, like, it's developed by the Blender Institute in this case of Open Data, but also we should maybe be more open about how open these projects are. You know, just like Blender, the Open Data project, if someone like watching this is really into data or statistics or Python website, web development and stuff, or an ex-Google engineer or something like that, you know, just get in touch. There is a Blender Open Data channel in Blender.chat that you can join and help with this kind of stuff. The problem is that, yeah, it's because it's developed at Blender. Right now, people can't work on this because there is other stuff going on. There is a Blender Cloud. There is new projects coming that it will be announced before 3.0 for sure. There are many other projects going on, but we should ask the community for help for this kind of stuff. Question? I don't know. Let's do 2 more. For which Blender open fields were the extensions used to make? For which Blender open films were the extensions used to make? Or which add-ons were used for the open movie films? We don't use many add-ons for the Blender open movies. I know the team doesn't really rely a lot on add-ons, except the ones that are made by the team for like shot building, for example. There is in Blender, in developer.blender.org, there is the add-on. Well, actually, you can read about it on the cloud. If you go to cloud.blender.org, there is a blog post that was added recently on contact sheet, light tracing, animation caching. For example, animation caching, it's a part of an add-on that is called Blender Studio Tools, and you can find here, the code here, and that add-on is part of, like, that functionality is part of a bunch of collections of tools that the team are using, like the shot builder, contact sheet, which is the one that is mentioned in the previous blog post that allows you to build like a grid of your images, of your strips. So all these tools developed by the Blender Studio, they are released as open source. So we are using add-ons, but not any add-on that wouldn't allow you to, like, no commercial add-ons, for example. No add-ons that we couldn't ship with the open movies. So you should be able to remake all the open movie projects. Okay, and the last question. Hi, Pablo. I hope your Monday is going well. It is a bit late, but it is. Regarding geometry nodes, I noticed that everyone wants to differentiate the noodles that go through the geometry inputs and outputs and the fields inputs and outputs. People have suggested using dashed lines or even different colors, but I'm still trying to understand why it's necessary. In the different node editors of Blender, like the shader editors, anytime I connect 2 nodes with incompatible inputs or outputs, the noodle turns red. Why does geometry nodes need to be any different? Well, actually, Blender in geometry nodes, it also turns the noodles also turn red when they are when there's no compatible inputs. For example, here you see it becomes red. That is already a thing. It's just failing. It should also trigger a warning here maybe and tell you why. But the reason why geometry nodes, inputs and outputs, and the fields, it's important to show it. It's because it's a completely different how do you call it, workflow. Like the type of data that goes through the noodles is different. Whereas in shader nodes, it's all the same. You can basically connect anything with anything. Well, maybe shaders with colors, kind of, but no. But it's always data that is flowing. But in geometry nodes, especially with fields, there are something that is called a callback, which is not the same as passing geometry with it. Sometimes you are passing a function. So it is important to tell when you have actual data that you can visualize here in the spreadsheet, for example, as of when you are using functions, when you have functions. So that is the main difference. And the dash lines, it's so you can tell them when you're not looking directly at the sockets. The colors is an experiment. I think colors should be used. It would be useful to have either way, like even for just regular connections. But the dash lines is so when you see it when you're not looking directly at it, and the sockets is to know what you can connect or not. If you can connect geometry or functions. Okay, cool. That is all for this week. I think I managed to cover as much as possible, especially a bunch of news. Okay. I need to somehow tell the camera to balance white here and not here. I'm using the metering option spot, but I think it's not doing a great job at it. However, I do have a filter now, a ND filter. There you go. Okay. That now I should take to the office because I'm going to start streaming from the office eventually. Hope you had a good time. Remember, if you know anybody or you speak Spanish, let them know that I do this show in Spanish in another channel it's called Blender.Today, like Blender.Today in Spanish. And we're going to do exactly the same, basically. So it's good to share news in your mother language. To me, this was a very successful week. We had so much. We answered questions, but we had so many improvements. Which one was your favorite? To me, I think performance, like being able to drag textures around, and animation performance, playback being so much faster now. But having curves now available, they can have geometry nodes now. That opens the doors for so many things, and the future for other object types to also have geometry nodes. So it's gonna be pretty exciting from now on. Next week is, let's see, next week we have, well, this week is, and the first few days of the next week are gonna be crazy with all the new stuff that's coming, that it should come if they want to make it for Blender 3, for the final release of Blender 3. Remember, Blender 3 is the beginning of a series. So if it doesn't make it to 3.0, it's going to be 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. For 2 years, it's going to go on the Blender 3 series. So don't worry, it will make it in time. For the time being, remember, you can play with it, you can share it, you can add your own stuff, you can see it, you can change it, you can make a difference, and create anything you want. It's your own 3D software. Okay, you know the deal. You know the drill. Let's see again next week. Same place, same time. I don't know if physical space, but let's do it again. Same next week. Headphones alert. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I hope it wasn't too loud. Okay, see you and have fun. Ciao.